Welcome to this deep dive brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries. Today we're getting into Dr. Joel Fuhrman's superimmunity. Look, we know you want the core ideas, the stuff that really matters for your health, without wading through everything. So that's what we're doing today, pulling out the key insights from superimmunity. You'll get the picture, but hopefully not feel buried in details.
Yeah, and one thing that really jumps out right away is that story in the foreword, Aram Barsamian.
Oh, right, the bronchitis story.
Exactly. I mean, imagine getting bronchitis every single winter for, what, over 30 years?
Terrible.
And then he switches to Fuhrman's nutritional approach, and bam, 2.5 years, not a single cold, flu, nothing.
That's pretty incredible. Makes you really consider Fuhrman's big question, doesn't it?
It really does. Could we actually, build serious resistance to common bugs just through food?
So that's our mission today then, exploring how nutrition can seriously power up our defenses based on this book.
That's the plan, getting into the nuts and bolts of superimmunity.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is superimmunity, according to Fuhrman? What's the core concept?
Fundamentally, it's this idea that your immune system isn't, fixed, it's dynamic. Fuhrman argues you can genuinely supercharge it with the right nutrition.
Supercharge it, so not just minor tweaks.
No, we're talking about a real boost. Significantly better resistance to things like colds and the flu, and potentially a much lower risk for chronic diseases like cancer down the road.
Right, so it's more of a fundamental health strategy, not just avoiding sniffles.
Precisely. It's a shift in thinking. Now, the book's realistic, it doesn't promise you'll never get sick, but the main point is, with top-notch nutrition, those really common serious diseases could become, well, pretty uncommon for you personally.
That's a bold idea. Okay, the book talks a lot about food equals health. Not exactly revolutionary, but how does Fuhrman build on that?
Well, he connects the dots, really. He looks at how ancient cultures knew food was medicine and then links it to modern science. And he introduces this key term, phytochemicals.
Phytochemicals. Okay.
Think of them as these amazing compounds in plants. They're not just your standard vitamins or minerals. We're talking hundreds of other compounds. Things like anthocyanins giving berries their color, or those pungent compounds in garlic and onions. And these have specific, powerful effects on our immunity and overall health.
So vitamins and minerals are just like scratching the surface.
Kinda, yeah. For truly optimal immune function, we need this whole orchestra of phytochemicals. And the best source, unrefined whole plant foods. That's where they're really concentrated.
But the book points out that the standard American diet doesn't look much like that, does it?
Not even close, unfortunately. The USDA data he cites, it shows most calories come from soft drinks, sugar, processed stuff, animal products, which leaves very little room for the vegetables, fruits, beans, and seeds, the foods actually packed with these phytochemicals. It really shows what's missing.
A diet high in calories but low in actual nutrients. The book lists a whole bunch of these key compounds we miss out on. Can you give some examples?
Sure. You've got carotenoids, think beta-carotene, lycopene, powerful antioxidants, then flavonoids, polyphenols, huge groups, anti-inflammatory antioxidant, quercetin, found in onions, apples, another strong one,
Okay.
anthocyanins in berries, like we mentioned, allium compounds in the onion family, anti-cancer, immune boosting, glucosinolates in cruciferous veggies. They help with detoxification.
Wow, it's a lot.
It is. Lignans, pectins, the list goes on. But the point is, antioxidants fight off cell damage from free radicals and processed foods, animal products. They just don't have significant amounts of this diverse stuff.
It really highlights needing more than just macronutrients, which leads to Fuhrman's food pyramid, right? How's that different from the traditional one?
It's basically flipped upside down. The old pyramid often had grains at the wide base.
Right, I remember that.
Fuhrman says, no, the foundation, the stuff you eat most, that should be the most nutrient-dense foods. So vegetables primarily. Fruits, beans, seeds, these form the base.
The logic being, eat more of the healthiest stuff.
Exactly.
All right.
Prioritize foods that give you the most nutrients per calorie, the biggest nutritional bang for your buck,
Simple, but powerful. Okay, so this ties directly into how nutrition affects our immunity against infections.
Yeah, and what's really striking is how the book argues our nutritional status isn't just passive. It actively influences how susceptible we are. It even talks about how nutrient deficiencies might allow viruses to actually become more virulent, more aggressive.
That's slightly terrifying. The book mentioned a study in Vietnam with malnourished children.
Yes, that was compelling. They increased the kids' vegetable intake, gave them more micronutrients, and the result, roughly half the rate of respiratory illnesses compared to the group still mainly eating rice.
Wow. So better nutrition, fewer infections, pretty direct link.
Very direct. It shows how nutrient-rich food can strengthen our defenses.
And you mentioned it might even affect the viruses.
That's the really interesting implication. The idea that a nutritarian diet packed with micronutrients might actually suppress viral mutations.
So limiting their ability to cause severe disease.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
That's the suggestion, that our food choices could impact the pathogens themselves.
Which makes the typical American diet seem even more problematic, lacking those very foods, fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds.
Precisely. The book connects it back to historical famines and the epidemics that followed. A reminder that even now, poor nutrition has really serious consequences.
Knowledge isn't power unless you use it, right? Which kind of leads into the book's critique of modern medicine's approach sometimes, particularly the reliance on drugs.
Right. It starts with a quote, apparently from a medical school professor, saying, all drugs have potential toxicity. Use them carefully. And then it suggests a link between our nutrient-poor diets and the heavy use of medications, antibiotics, vaccines, immunosuppressants. Could this combination be a factor in rising cancer rates? The book poses that question. It also notes that just spending more on healthcare doesn't automatically mean people live longer, healthier lives. The main argument isn't anti-medicine. It's against using drugs to basically paper over the cracks caused by poor nutrition, especially for things like diabetes or high blood pressure.
Yeah, it mentions some issues with diabetes meds.
It does.
Yeah.
Points out some can lead to weight gain, possibly increase certain risks, and it cites the Accord study.
The one where aggressive glucose lowering.
Exactly. Using medication to really force blood sugar down actually increased the risk of death in type 2 diabetics. Quite counterintuitive.
And concerns about blood pressure meds too, ARBs and beta blockers.
It touches on research suggesting ARBs might promote blood vessel growth that could theoretically help tumors. Just a theoretical concern raised. And for beta blockers, it mentions studies that didn't always show they reduced death rates in hypertensive patients compared to doing nothing.
Plus side effects.
Right. Fatigue, dizziness, falls, especially in older people. The book highlights the huge number of ER visits and hospital stays caused by adverse drug reactions every year.
From common drugs too, like antibiotics, painkillers.
Blood thinners, steroids.
Yes, yeah.
The core message is, medicine can't fix the underlying cellular problems caused by years of bad nutrition.
Okay, that sets the stage for looking at preventative measures, like flu shots. The book seems balanced but cautious.
Yeah, it stresses the benefit-to-risk idea for any intervention. It acknowledges flu can be bad, especially for the vulnerable, but it questions routinely vaccinating healthy adults, saying the vaccine usually only covers a small fraction of circulating viruses anyway. It cites that Cochrane review finding weak evidence for effectiveness in healthy adults and kids.
And mentions ingredients.
It does. Formaldehyde, thimerosal, the mercury preservative, and it notes a lack of long-term studies on, say, cancer risk or reproductive effects. Plus, it lists reported side effects, joint pain, swollen glands, up to serious neurological things like Guillain-Barré, things to be aware of.
What about antivirals like Tamiflu?
Briefly touches on them. Limited effectiveness, often need to be taken very early. Potential for overuse. The advice is basically, be cautious about rushing for medical help with typical flu symptoms. Watch for serious signs, like trouble breathing, but otherwise support your body.
So, if drugs aren't the main answer, what is? This brings us to the superfoods, right?
Exactly. Foods that are exceptionally good at boosting immunity and protecting against disease. And here it shares Irene Zabransky's story, Stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, overcoming it with Fuhrman's nutritional guidance, a really powerful example.
Definitely.
The book then focuses on the science showing specific benefits of certain food groups.
Greens, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds, these seem key. There's even a diagram about green veggies and DNA methylation for cancer prevention.
Yes, precisely. And to make these easy to remember, Fuhrman created the acronym GOMBBS.
GOMBBS. Okay, let's break it down. G is for greens, specifically cruciferous ones.
That's right. Kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, they contain sulfur compounds. When you chop or chew them, these turn into isothiocyanates, ITCs like sulforaphane.
ITCs.
These are powerhouses, immune boosting, anti-cancer. They can help stop tumors from getting a blood supply, fight H. pylori bacteria. They also activate something called NRF2, Think of it like a master switch for your body's own antioxidant and detox systems. Greens flip that switch on.
Impressive. Okay, O is for onions, more than just flavor.
Much more. Rich in organosulfur compounds, flavonoids. Research links them to lower cancer rates, less inflammation, better immunity. One study showed significantly lower cancer rates in people who ate lots of onions.
M is for mushrooms. What's their special contribution?
They have unique compounds that fight disease. And like the greens, they can inhibit angiogenesis, the tumor blood supply. And interestingly, their benefits seem boosted when eaten with onions and greens, a sort of synergy.
Cool. Then BB is for berries.
Packed with antioxidants and phytochemicals, especially those colorful anthocyanins, great for fighting cell damage.
And the second B is beans. Why are they super?
Beans are just fantastic, loads of fiber, resistant starch, micronutrients. They help feed good gut bacteria, crucial for immunity, and they're linked to preventing cancer and heart disease.
Got it. And finally, S for seeds,
Right.
even though they're higher in fat.
Yep. The book stresses that unlike animal fats, the fats in whole nuts and seeds are protective. They help prevent and reverse disease. Studies link them to longer life, less illness. But key is eating them whole, not just the oil, to get the fiber and all the other good stuff.
Okay, GOMBBS. Greens, onions, mushrooms, berries, beans, seeds. A great takeaway framework. Now, the book also tackles common cold and flu remedies, what works, what doesn't.
This section challenges a lot of common practices. First, most colds, bronchitis, sinus issues are viral. Antibiotics, useless.
And the green mucus myth.
Debunked. Doesn't automatically mean bacterial infection.
So what should we do for a typical virus?
Rest. Good nutrition. Let your immune system do its job without interference. The book argues against many OTC meds. Cough suppressants, antihistamines, often ineffective, plus side effects. Even suppressing a fever, a natural defense, might not be helpful. And things like aspirin, ibuprofen, acetaminophen could potentially dampen immune response.
How about chicken soup, the classic remedy?
Comforting, sure. Helps with congestion, maybe. But the book says it doesn't significantly impact the virus itself. Suggests nutrient-rich veggie soups are probably better.
And vitamin C, everyone takes that, right?
Well, the book says it might help prevent colds if you're deficient or stressed. But for the average person, it doesn't seem to reduce how often you get colds. And once you're sick, probably not effective at shortening it.
Other remedies. Echinacea, ginseng.
Limited evidence, according to the book. Same for garlic, really, for treating colds. It does mention some promising things, though. Resveratrol from colorful fruits, berries for immune support, vitamin D's crucial low levels linked to more respiratory illness. Black elderberry extract shows some potential in early research. Might inhibit flu virus growth, maybe shorten symptoms, but it's still preliminary.
It all seems to point back to that core equation. Health, nutrients, calories. Explain that a bit more.
It's all about nutrient density. Eat foods high in nutrients relative to their calories. Minimize the opposite calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods.
Like?
White bread, processed snacks, sugary drinks, even fruit juice lacks the fiber and full nutrient package of whole fruit. It also discusses glycemic load, how quickly foods raise blood sugar. High GL foods are linked to chronic disease.
So focus on low GL carbs.
Yes. Beans, non-starchy veggies, berries cut way back on high glycemic processed stuff that suppresses immunity and potentially increases cancer risk.
Okay, let's talk fats and oils again. That can be confusing.
The book clarifies. Fats in whole nuts and seeds.
Good.
Protective. They come with fiber, nutrients. Extracted oils, not so much. Very high calorie, low nutrient. Oil is not a health food, according to Fuhrman.
Because the fiber in whole nuts limits fat absorption?
Exactly. You don't get that benefit with pure oil. Stick to whole nuts and seeds.
And protein, the protein paradox. What's the paradox?
We need protein, obviously. But we often overestimate how much, and too much, especially animal protein, can be harmful.
How so?
Excess protein gets converted to fat or strains the kidneys, can leach calcium, and crucially, it raises levels of IGF-1.
Insulin-like growth factor 1, linked to?
Increased cancer risk, yeah.
Yeah.
So the book advocates for getting adequate protein from plants and warns against high animal protein intake.
It's about quality and avoiding excess, not just grams. Okay, what about individualizing this? Concerns about vegan diets?
It addresses the common ones, B12, EPA, DHA, omega-3s, iodine, zinc, but it says these are manageable as supplements. B12 is essential to supplement on a strict vegan diet or specific food choices like algae oil for EPHA, iodized salt or seaweed, varied plants for zinc. The main point is a truly micronutrient-rich diet requires cutting back on processed foods and animal products.
What if someone needs more protein or fat? Athletes, maybe?
Use more high-quality plant sources. Sunflower seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts, flax. It acknowledges rare cases where someone might need a little animal protein due to specific issues, but emphasizes keeping it very low comparatively.
What about taking vitamin supplements in general?
The book suggests a good multivitamin mineral can be beneficial for ensuring basics like D, B12, zinc, iodine.
But with caveats.
Big caveats. Watch out for high doses of supplemental vitamin A, the retinol form, and synthetic folic acid. These might actually cancel out the benefits.
Folic acid, isn't that important?
Natural folate from greens is vital, yes, but synthetic folic acid added to foods and supplements. Some research links it to increased cancer risk. Get folate from food.
Interesting distinction. Okay, probiotics. Fermented foods.
Gut health is key for immunity, definitely.
Yeah.
A high-fiber, plant-rich diet naturally feeds good gut bacteria. Antibiotics mess that up. Probiotic supplements might help after antibiotics, but diet is the #1 factor for a healthy microbiome long-term.
Got it. The book also warns about salt and gives a take on coffee.
Yeah, way too much sodium in the typical diet. Clear link to high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease risk. Aim for under 1,000 milligrams a day, mostly from food itself, not added salt.
And coffee.
Acknowledges studies linking it to lower diabetes risk, but emphasizes caffeine as a drug, a stimulant, can mess with sleep, make you mistake withdrawal for hunger. Don't rely on it for health. If you drink it, maybe water-processed decaf in moderation, without unhealthy additions.
What about soy and fish? Always debated.
Book highlights soy's protective effects against certain cancers, breast, prostate, etc. Fish, yes, omega-3s, but also concentrated animal protein, which raises IGF-1 and environmental pollutants, mercury, PCBs, dioxins.
Fish oil supplements.
Can be helpful, but potential issues with rancidity, liver stress. Need purified, certified products, check freshness.
And the importance of organic produce. Minimizing pesticides.
Definitely. Cites EPA concerns about pesticide carcinogenicity, health issues in farm workers. While eating produce is still better than not, minimizing exposure is wise, especially since animal products tend to concentrate these toxins more.
So prioritize organic for the dirty dozen.
Yes, things like strawberries, spinach, apples,
Mhm.
and the clean 15 like avocados, onions, pineapple are generally lower in pesticides if you can't get organic. Peeling non-organic fruits helps too.
Lastly, the book connects all this to autoimmune diseases.
Right, where the immune system attacks the body. Psoriasis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's. Fuhrman reports success treating these with nutrition. Cites surveys showing significant improvement, even remission, in RA patients on his plan.
Medical literature supports this too.
Yes, mentions studies on plant-based diets helping autoimmune conditions. Emphasizes immune-supporting micronutrients, especially from those cruciferous greens again. Includes some really moving stories from people who turn their health around, sometimes surprising their doctors.
So how does the book suggest people actually start doing this?
Simple steps. A big daily salad, a veggie bean soup with mushrooms and onions make extra for leftovers. Cooked greens with meals. It provides recipes too, breakfast ideas, smoothies, dressings, main dishes to make it practical, and encourages adapting them to your own taste.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive on superimmunity, the big takeaway seems to be the incredible power of nutrient-dense plants for building a strong immune system.
Absolutely. And recognizing the limits and risks of just relying on meds while seeing the huge potential for change through diet.
That GOMBBS framework, greens, onions, mushrooms, berries, beans, seeds, feels like a really practical tool.
Definitely something easy to remember and apply.
And for everyone listening, here's something to think about. What if you shifted your focus, moved away from just counting calories, and really started prioritizing nutrient density? How might that truly revolutionize your health, your resilience? We definitely encourage exploring these ideas more, maybe checking out the recipes and details in superimmunity itself. This deep dive was brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries.